All right, this is how we do. Okay, we're going to do a breakdown of How We Do by Sid and Joshua, released on Repopulate Mars. Let's dive right in. Okay, so far, just beats, right? I mean, one of the things I love about Sid is Sid just like checks off the boxes. Just extremely tight, streamlined productions, but impactful because he's not doing a bunch of extra nonsense. He's just doing what makes the listener really feel something, and that's like, you know, really what you want to do as a producer. I mean, but look at this, look at this, right? We can just see exactly what's going on. Intro. Okay, what's going on with the... there we go. Okay, so intro, bass drop, break 1, hook drop 1, main break and build, hook drop 2, outro. Okay, HT2 formula. So, real cool. So sick. What a great fill. I mean, probably just something right off a splice, but still, like, you know, a lot of times what you would expect right here when you're going from the intro into the bass drop, right before the bass drop, there's going to be a kind of like what I call an intro hook tease. And so here, instead of an intro hook tease, kind of teasing what the main hook of the track is, we're just getting this nice fill. But that nice fill sets us up to land the bass drop. To land the bass line, okay? In the intro, just the beats, and then we finally introduce the bass line, teach people how to move and groove and dance to the track. But what I'm thinking here is I'm curious if there's any other kind of lift. Does the bass line just come in, or is there something else that gets lifted maybe in the drums? So let's check that out. Okay, so we get the bass line and we get an open hat 909 lift, okay? So you can hear that there's just a 16th note kind of vibe going on in the top end. We have a really tight 909 hat. Okay, but then that opens up just a little bit. So we get a 909 hat with a little bit more of a tail as we get into the bass drop. So intro, we got a drum fill. We enter the bass drop with the bass line and a little bit more of an open 909 hat. So we're kind of getting a double lift there. So most important thing about a bass drop is simply dropping the bass line, and that's exactly what we're getting here. No frills, nothing, just bass line. Now, the reason why that's important is because at this point we're teaching people how to. The intro is going to be where the DJ is going to typically either the intro or through the break, you know, break 1 or something like that. But if they're mixing in through the intro, then when we get into the bass drop, then that's when people are starting to learn how to move, groove, and dance to the track. So you don't want to overwhelm them with hooks because they're still trying to just figure out and kind of move along. But once they get it figured out, then you can start dropping hooks on top, and that's what the hook drops are all about, is finally putting the hooks over the groove. But early on in the track, in the bass drop, we just want to introduce the groove character without any of the hook characters yet. Just introduce the groove, get people dancing, get them to learn the groove. But this is a minute-long bass drop, as you could see, all right? And so there's definitely going to be some development here in this drop. And so let's see how it develops. A couple ways that it could develop. 3 ways, let me just say. Number 1, the drums can continue to develop so we can get some more drum elements. Number 2, we can start to introduce some of the hooks, right? Especially in the second half right here, in the B section of the intro break. I'm sorry, of the bass drop, the B section of the bass drop. Third is the way that it can develop is we start to pull people into the break. Okay, so those are the 3 things that I'm kind of looking out for. Okay, So we get a little bit of a development in the drums because we start to get a little syncopated snare. So I'm going to play it back here, and on the right speaker, you're not going to hear a little snare. But when we get over here, you're going to hear this little kind of skippy syncopated snare. Check it out. Okay, just rolling. But now when I come over here, you're going to hear a snare on the right. And you hear that little ding, just adding in little incidentals. So this is something that Sid does a lot, actually, which is a way that he develops drums is by just bringing in these little syncopated things, just extra syncopation, usually one shot. So he's programming them in. And so, yeah, just something I've noticed that he does a lot. And yeah, so that's it. So the first 8 bars, just straight groove, not even any kind of synco pop. So the way that I like to break down drums, there's 3 main elements to drums. You've got your basic beat, which is your kick, clap, and hat, and then you have what I call synco filler. Synco filler. Syncopation is just the stuff that gives the drums its groove, like so over here with the shakers, that's an example of synco filler because it's playing 16th notes, so it's giving a little bit of groove to the track, but it's just filling it out. It's just filler, right? And so you could hear those 2 first elements, the basic beat, kick, clap, hat, right, and then the okay, that is the basic beat, and that is synco filler. Okay, and then when we get into here, okay, what we're doing is we're adding a layer onto the basic beat, so we're getting that slightly open hat, but the synco filler is the same. It's just the shakers, so we're still only getting the basic beat and the synco filler. I need to write this down as an example. Give me 1 second. And so, again, we just have the basic beat and the synco filler. But then the way that Sid and Joshua will develop the drums is by adding in that 3rd piece of the drums, which is the synco pop. Okay? So syncopation sounds that pop out of the mix. So you have your synco filler, which is just chill, just hanging out, shakers, right? We're just filling out the space. But the synco pop are the things that pop out of the groove, okay? And so right here in the first minute, okay, we've got 3 perfect examples of a basic beat, a development in the basic beat, synco filler, and then a development with synco pop. And so let's listen to the synco pop part, okay? So I'm going to start it a little bit before that 8-bar section, and then we'll roll into it, and you'll hear that snare come in, and just listen to how it pops out of the mix, okay? Just pops. There you go. So we got all 3 of the drum elements. Basic beat, synco filler, synco pop. All right. So let's keep going. So how is the rest of the track going to develop? What's going to happen in the B section of the bass drop? Awesome, dude. Entry into the B section. We got that fill again, so that's going to be a theme that runs through the track. I'm expecting that pretty much to be before every drop now. Maybe in the to transition from the A section to the B section in this drops, although this looks like it's about 24 bars. This one's 32 bars, so maybe they'll have that fill over here and then maybe even into the outro. But that's not a theme. This drum fill is going to be something that helps us transition in an exciting way. And then we get that nice, interesting entry, which sounds like some kind of maybe percussion thing with a fast delay with a high feedback. That's why you get that brrr, almost metallic-y kind of sound. All right, cool. So remember before what I was saying is what are the 3 ways that we could develop through the bass drop? Number 1 was developing the drums. So we got a little bit of a development, actually 2 ways. Number 1 is lifting up the open hat, so giving that extra kind of opener hat or more open hat, adding in the synco pop snare. And then, so developing the drums. And then another thing was maybe introducing a hook. But what we're doing here is introducing a hook and helping us pull into the break one. How are they doing that? Because they're starting to introduce a vocal here. It's a vocal chop, but it's starting to open up. It's with a low pass. And so again, this is a classic CID move, and he was on ZenWorld's YouTube channel one time talking about his productions and saying that I think he got this technique. This is the gated technique inside of Ableton. So for example, this is just a beat here, but if you turn on warp and you go to beats, you go to the forward transient mode, and you bring this down, this is going to act as a gate based on where the transient markers are. And so let's just kind of isolate this for a second, and just so I could really show you this, how it works. So look at the waveform here. I mean, this is kind of silly example because it's mostly just drum transients. But if I bring the gate all the way down, you'll see what happens. I'll hit Command J, and you can see how it just swoops them out. Okay, it's just a gate that just chops these all the way down. Okay, but that's what he's doing on the vocal. Another thing you could do is, instead of using the forward transient mode or the detection mode as the transients, you can use the detection or the preserve as like 16ths, for example. Okay, so if I bounce this, let's just do this really quick. So I'm going to bounce this as the 16th, just so you can see what it looks like, and then I'll bounce it based on the transients right here. This one, let's go to transients and 0, and then we'll Command J this. And so if we zoom in, they'll be a little bit different because this one's going to get all the 16ths. All right, and then this one you see is just based on where the transients were detected. And so not purely on the 16th. This is a good example right here. So you can see that this is a little bit in the picture because this was detecting just the 16ths. But we don't have this little kind of wiggly low, lows here because the transient detector was right here on this sound. And so you can see a subtle difference there. But the reason why I want to bring this up is because that's what he's doing with the vocal, is he's just using that kind of transient forward mode. And from ZenWorld's video, he talked about how Sid talked about how he got this technique from Wax Motif, I think, But like if we just have it on the forward transient mode, right? Just bring this down and listen to how it starts to gate the sounds. And this is a track by Dan Ziglum. I hope that's how you pronounce it, the name, dude. But it sounds Ziglum. And yeah, in the community, super cool tracks. This is an amazing track, Perpetual Epiphany. So I hope you don't mind me using it. But anyway, so let's go to the 16ths and listen to this. See how it just creates a gate effect? And so if you put that on vocals or something like that, let's just try it for fun. Let's just go down to 30 seconds. That's cool. Wow, that's really cool. I wish they had a 64ths. Yeah, anyway, so that's really cool. But that's what's going on with the vocals right here. Okay, again, using cool kind of percussion sounds, almost techno-y, metallic kind of sounds, and then with that fast, that high feedback and fast rate to create those kind of cool, like just impact sounds. Okay, I was wanting to see if that snare was going through the third 8-bar section here too. Okay, we got that drum fill again to help us transition, right? Again, the theme of a track, and we're now getting into the break. And so, intro, bass drop. So what happened in this bass drop here? Really chill bass drop. It's an extended bass drop. Typically, bass drops tend to be about 16 bars. This is 32, but it really functions as a 16-bar bass drop because we just have the A section, which is mostly groove, and the B section is just the transition with the vocal, right? And that you could do that in a 16-bar bassline bass drop as well, where the first 8 bars is just groove and the second 8 bars is that vocal that just kind of transitions up. The other thing that's going on here is that we're going to get that synco pop lift in the second 8 bars of the A section, and then in the B section we're also getting those kind of entries. So we get that entry on the first 8 bars, and then we're going to get another different kind of entry on the second 8 bars. Okay, so that's it. I mean, that's really the difference there between the 16 or 32. Just a little bit of extra flourishes. And so now we're getting into the break. And the most important thing about breaks is, number 1, give them a break. Number 2, introduce something new or different, or usually the main hook. Number 3 would maybe create a sense of atmosphere. Number 4 would be to build tension. And number 5 could be like have a break entry. Right, just something that introduces the break, and we can even kind of consider that fill as a sort of break entry, but not really. Not really. That's kind of just a transition into the break. But if something just lands, like one of those impact sounds. All right, so there's your new thing. We got that vocal texture. We're giving them a break because there's a high pass. Okay, there's another new thing. You can hear that this is how you can hear the main hook coming up. So we're getting the 2 most important things. Number 1, give them a break. Number 2, which is introduce something new or different. Okay, and the ambience is created by the delay on that vocal. It's a little bit more of an ambience. And the importance of an ambience in the break is to simply push the break back in the mix. So the drops you want right in the face of the listener. You want that to have that big impact and just hit them in their chest. But with the breaks, you're opening things up. You're literally taking a break, right? You're just stepping back, letting things breathe a little bit. And an Atmos kind of sound, or any way of creating Atmos, is just going to contribute to that feeling. You can have a dedicated Atmos sound. John Summit's someone who does that a lot. We're just literally bringing in sounds that serve as an atmosphere, right? And then, yeah, and so the atmosphere that I feel is being created by the delay on the vocal right now. Okay, we're starting to get some of the build tension. There's like a little bit of a LFO type of riser that's kind of creeping down the middle. So, so that'll probably help build some tension. Okay, so the drums go all the way down. So the drums, one of the important things in the first break especially, not so much in the second, is just keeping the drums going, is at least when you start to enter the break. And so that's what they're doing here, because the listener's not ready for the groove to go away yet. They're still learning the groove. I mean, this is a 32-bar bass drop, so you could probably cut the drums if you wanted to. You don't have to, but I'm personally a fan of letting the drums keep going. But in this case, the drums keep going, but then they start to just kind of filter out. And the obvious importance of that is the impact that creates when you finally bring the drums back. So we have the groove keep going, that vibe is still going, so it's not just dead on the dance floor. People still have that kind of rhythm to latch onto, and that kind of just fades out and builds tension just in and of itself by fading the drums out, because people want that groove. They want to dance. And so that finally comes back. So just slowly fading the drums out. Now we're getting your typical build elements, right? Rep, roll, rise, and grow. So some kind of hook repetition. Right? That's a rep, roll. They don't have a snare roll in here. That's okay. You don't have to have all the build elements, but rep, roll, rise. Do we have rise? Yeah. This is how. Okay, let's hear it. Right, rep, roll, rise, and grow. Any kind of growing in the space? Maybe if you consider the delay getting more intense, but for the first break, you don't need to have all the build elements. You don't need to have all the build elements in the main break and build here, or the main build. But the thing is, like, you can hold back a little bit more in the break, especially relative to the main build here in the main break and build, because this is where you want to build the most amount of tension. And so here you could just kind of, build a little bit of tension. And the tools of building tension are mostly rep, roll, rise, and grow. All right, and so you can see here that they're using rep and they're using rise mostly. Maybe a little bit of grow, but mostly rep and rise. All right, and so the next part, they have this small little building pattern, right? The building of tension. They're going to cut that off. So I call this a PIPO, pattern interrupt payoff. So we have the building pattern, and then that gets interrupted. It gets cut, and that always just wakes people up. It makes them really alert. And then we're going to get the payoff. So pattern interrupt, and then payoff. We break we interrupt the build pattern, cut it dead in its tracks. And when people are fully tuned in to what's going on, we have their full attention right there. We deliver the payoff, which is going to be the main vocal here.
This is how we do.
See that? Listen to that. Listen to how it just grabs your attention.
This is how we do. We make a move and act the fool while we up in the club. This is how we do. Nobody do it like we do it, so show us some love.
All right, so now we're in hook drop 1. This is typically we're going to have hooks over groove. This track is pretty minimal, and the breaks are really where the hooks mostly come in. But let's just see how this 24-bar drop develops, right? So if you're not going to have a lot of hooks over the groove, then what are you going to do to keep things interesting? And so this is going to be a great example of that. Now this is a 24-bar section, so this immediately makes me think CLT story. CLT story stands for chill, lift, and trans. Those are the 3 things that you can do on a kind of higher level, or maybe even on an underlying level, emotional level, energy level. So a chill is just where we're just chilling out. We're just listening to the groove. That's chill. Right here, this is a perfect chill, right? We're just chilling. And then a lift would be, for example, bringing in a shaker or a ride, or in this case, the synco pop snare comes in. So that's an example of a lift. And then a transition. This is a great example of a CLT story right here, actually, the bass drop, because here we have a chill. And then in the second 8-bar, we get the lift with the synco snare. Okay, that's a lift. And then in the last 16 bars, the B section is a trans, because we have that vocal that just kind of slowly comes up and transitions us into the break. So this is a great example of a CLT story as well. But like if you're going to go for a pure CLT story, then it just only needs to be 24 bars, because chill 8 bars, lift 8 bars, transition 8 bars. All right, so chill, lift, and trans. Chill, lift, the energy, and transition. And so let's see if this follows the CLT structure. Let's see if it tells the CLT story. And also just pay attention to how we can keep things minimal but still exciting through different ways. So right away we're getting that kind of vocal entry with a similar effect to what they're doing over here. So either through a repetition or a loop inside of like Ableton, where they're just kind of pitching it up, they're looping it and pitching it up, right? You could do it like that, or delay could be a way that you can create something like this. But the cool thing is that the effects that are on the entries and the impacts are all kind of similar. They're all kind of the same vibe. Right? That kind of metallic, using that kind of delay to create that metallic vibe. Okay, that's a much faster delay right there, but nonetheless. All kind of using the same effect, so kind of a thematic thing is there as well. And also just the chop of the vocal kind of fits into this theme of just like things happening in shorter time intervals, like right? And so all this kind of like using like short time intervals in an interesting way. So a big entry cluster there. Okay, so now we're in the first 8 bars. So let's see what happens. Okay. So again, minimal, just groove, but these exciting spikes of energy.
Nobody do it like we do it, so
All right, so right here, this is a great example of punks as well. So when did things happen? When did things happen in this 8-bar section? Well, we got an entry cluster on the 1, right? And then that continues. It's an entry cluster, so there's kind of a succession of sounds. But then the next thing that happened is at the 4-bar mark, and then another thing that happened is at the 8-bar mark. So these are happening, so things are happening on what I call punks. Punks is short for punctuation points. And basically, it's kind of like a grammar of an 8-bar section. You know, if you think about it in like an English sentence, if we just take like a sentence, you can have maybe a comma in the middle and then a period at the end, right? There's a grammar to it. And the period is obviously a more dramatic punctuation mark than a comma, you know? And so you could think of a grammar of an 8-bar section as well. And so halfway through an 8-bar section, right, we could think of maybe putting a comma right there, a little bit of a comma. And in this case, let's see what their little comma is. Okay, I missed it. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that was it right there. Okay, so that's the P4, the punk at the 4-bar mark. P4, punk at the 4-bar mark. And so then when we go further on, we're going to get something at the end of the 8-bar section. So that's kind of like the period, right? It's a little bit more dramatic. And what does he bring in? He brings in the hook, the vocal.
Nobody do it like we do it, so
And he brings in that fill. Okay, so really dramatic there. We get the fill and we get the vocal. And so again, what is happening and when is it happening? Those are really important questions. So in this 8-bar section, we've got the entry cluster, we've got the groove, and then we have a punk at the 4, we have a punk at the 8. Okay, that's it. So if I was going to be kind of modeling this drop section for one of my own tracks, those are the 4 big things that I would be looking to do, right? You know, it would be just have obviously a cool groove, get some kind of entry cluster going, then find something for the P4, find something for the P8. And obviously the P8 here is connected to the main hook of the track, right? So it's just sprinkling in a main hook into the drop. Okay, so now we're in the second 8-bar section. So we had a little bit of an entry, and then we have this cool effect going, all right? Okay, so there we go. We get something at the 4. Remember, punks. Okay, so maybe punks are a way to keep things interesting over time. If you're going to have mostly groove, then you want to focus on what are the punks going to be, and you want them to be big, right? It's not like he's just doing like a little skippy at the 4-bar mark, right? They're big things that are happening. We got that big entry cluster. We've got that at the P4 in the first 8 bars. We've got the big vocal and fill at the 8-bar mark. Then we've got another entry kind of effect that goes down. Then we've got a big vocal at the 4. And what can we expect? We could probably expect something big to happen at the 8-bar mark of the second 8 bars, right? And so what's cool about this is that really the only things that are going on are the groove and then something at the 1, the 4, the 8. Big groove, 1, 4, 8. Okay? So really simple if you think about it from a higher level. Another thing that I want to point out is that there's sections of this drop that are really just groove, or like I can imagine a producer feeling insecure about nothing's really going on here. I need to put something here, you know, people are going to get bored of my track. And it shows a level of confidence and maturity, you know, here, and experience. Experience was really the word that I wanted to use with Sid and Joshua, of course, because they're DJs. So obviously this track, but the reason why it's really good to check out top tracks like this one is, number one, obviously they sold a lot on the Beatport charts. But number two, when you have these top producers, they're playing their tracks out a lot, yeah, you know, and they're making tweaks. And when they finally release a song, then it's the best version of what they have played out. And maybe the track has gone through 10 iterations, you know, or maybe not, but still, you're getting the best version of what they want to put out there, you know. And so that's why it's really cool to model this stuff, because it has proven to work. The producer that's also a DJ who makes a living, obviously, working as a DJ and making music to play music in his sets, they're not going to put something out that's not going to work. right? Right? Reputation is on the line. And so that's why it's cool to model this stuff, because it has a proven track record, both in sales and then also in just the fact that they're releasing it, because it has worked in their own sets. And so that's why it's cool to model this stuff and really to break it down. And that's really the premise behind the entire ProTrack Breakdowns course, is extracting techniques from tracks that have a proven track record. Good God, that was saying tracks a lot. All right, but back to the point, okay? What I was saying about that whole rant there before I kind of got derailed is by myself is that, you know, producers might be insecure about not having a lot of things going on, but the way that you counteract that is if you have just chill groove, right? It's just a groove that keeps going. Make sure the punks are big, so you're getting these big spikes of energy, and so it's kind of normal, spike, big spike, exciting spike, normal, big spike. You know, that's kind of what it is. And it's that contrast between the kind of chill groove and the big spike of energy that allows them to be able to pull this off, where it's just mostly just a chill groove, but big energy spikes, right? Remember, that's what I was saying. Big punks, right? Not little things that are going on, big things.
Nobody do it like we do it, so show us some love.
Okay, there we go. So just a P8 vocal again, a little bit more dramatic than it seemed, with a little bit of an edit here. So taking out the kick. So now we're in the third 8 bars here. So what's happened so far? So we have the first 8, the second 8. We don't really kind of get a lift. I mean, this is kind of pushing it, but you can also you can almost treat that effect that just kind of carries throughout the entire thing, that LFO type of thing that carries throughout this entire second 8 bars, as a lift. Right, that's the thing. It just keeps going. Let's listen for any drum lifts.
Show us some love.
So no drum lifts, but it's just that thing that just continues, right? It just goes throughout the whole thing. The P4 is a little bit more dramatic because we're getting that kind of delay. But if anything, the lift here is just the effect that continues, because it's just this layer that just plays on top of the 8 bars that wasn't playing on top before. You know?
Nobody do it like we do it, so show us some love.
Okay, so he brings it back in that vocal. So this is a pretty clear lift right here, because we're just stepping it up with a vocal. My question is there going to be some kind of transition out, right? Because then we'll get like a CLT. This first bass drop right here is a really clean CLT. This one is a little bit more, you know, we have to stretch it, but like you can see the elements there. It's just kind of a unique execution of it. So here we're getting the synco snare. Do we have the synco snare over here? So we don't have the synco snare right here. What about in the second 8 bars? So we don't get the synco snare there either. So here in this 8 bar section, we're getting that syncopated snare. Remember earlier the conversation about synco pop. We're also getting that vocal. So we're getting 2 important lifts here, the vocal and the synco snare. Okay, and now we get a punk, right? A big thing at the 4 bar mark. What is it? Just that, you know, the brrr, that kind of metallic-y, fast delay sound. But my question is there going to be a transition? I don't know. So not really, but we do get that snare, that fill. And again, we get that. Let's listen over here. And again, like, man, again. So back here, when I was talking about that short delay, that short timer interval that they're playing with in this track, kind of a theme, like that's happening right here too, the brrr, that vocal. Okay, and then right here, we're getting another entry. I don't think we've had this one. Right, but that's the same thing. It's just looping something down, right? It's just playing with short time intervals, either through delay or through looping in simpler. Okay, so we don't get we don't get a trans element that plays through this, but we do get that little fill that takes us in. But if we just back up and look at this really quick, because again, the question is how do we develop a track that's pretty minimal? And the answer is pretty clear: punks. Okay, that's what you do: groove and punks, groove and punks, groove and punks. So that's what I'd be thinking about, right? And make sure that they're big. Right, so vocal punks connected to the main hook of the track, and then other little, kind of thematic, kind of impact sounds that he has, like here at the 4, right? What else? And then, so here in the first 8 bars, we got that big entry cluster. We got the P4, the P8 vocal. And then in the second 8 bars, we've got the entry kind of impact thing with the effect that kind of serves as a lift throughout the 8 bars. We got the P4 vocal with the delay. We got the P8 vocal. And we've got a pretty dramatic cut there, so edit. Okay, in the last 8 bars, we get the lift with the vocal texture and the syncopop. And then we got a P4 there with the big impact and the fast delay kind of thematic effect that's going on throughout the track. And then at the end we get the drum fill into the drop. All right, so those are just things that you could check off if you want to model this as a drop. Okay, I love that effect though, right? Because that's literally communicating we're settling the energy, which is exactly what's going on here. When we transition from the first drop into the main break and build, there's a couple ways we could do it. Number one, we could do what's called the strip drop. This is where we have 3 core elements. We have the kick, we have the bass, we have a hook on top. That's typically, you've heard that a million times. Plus you could have other things, but those are the 3 core things. Just the kick playing with the bass, and then you got the hook on top. That's one way that you can transition from the break, from the drop, hook drop one into the main break and build. Another way to do it is a simple high pass, right? And that's what's going on here. We're just high passing. And then another thing that we can do is, and the third way that we can transition is a cliff dive. Okay, a cliff dive is where you basically just drop into a sound, a hook, anything, no drums or extremely minimal drums. And it just feels like you're going from here and boom, just dropping in. So those are the 3 ways. You got the strip, the high pass, the cliff dive. And so this is just a very straightforward high pass. We got the drum fill, then we just go into the high pass, and we got that entry going into the main break and build. And so what we're going to do now from here is 24 bars is just simply develop, right? Or not develop, but build. So we'll just look at the very obvious build sounds that are going to be introduced to create tension as we go into the last drop, HT2. So very similar to before, okay? We've just got the high pass drums. We have the "This Is How We Do," so that's a little bit different. No. So that, I mean, that's what they had before. A rep with the delay, also having that kind of LFO effect going on, and it's just going to be dragged out a little bit longer. And that's a really important point because the main break and build, you can drag things out more. Before I was saying how in the break one you can hold things back, you can from building tension, and that's because like in the main break and build, what's going on, the underlying tension doesn't come from the tension building elements. That's not where the real tension comes from in the main break and build. Okay, the real tension in the main break and build comes from the fact that they no longer have hooks over groove. You've taken away what they want in some way. And just like a 2-year-old, when you take away their toy, they want it back. And that's the psychology of the listener right here, is they want their toy back, okay? That's where the real tension comes from in the main break and build. And what we could use is we could use build elements to amplify, to exaggerate, to poke and prod the listener and tell them, we're going to give it back to you, but we're going to make you wait. We're going to make you wait. We're going to make you want it so bad. We're going to fuel your craving. Okay, and that's what all those tension building things do, is they just fuel that craving. They make the listener want it so much more, so that when they finally get it, it's such a more satisfying resolution. Over here in the main, in the first break, they don't have that addiction yet. They don't have that craving yet. And so you don't need to go crazy with, you just need to set up the first drop, right? And so, but over here, they've got that first hit. They've got that first hit. And so you can leverage that. You can play off of that. You can tease it out. You can draw it out. And it's only going to make them want it more, right? And so, yeah, like, and so that's what's going on here. So it's a little bit longer. And so the build elements are starting earlier. We're getting that repetition with the vocal and the delay. We're getting that LFO thing, and then things are just going to build. And it's going to be drawn out a little bit more than over here. Because over in the main break and build, we have more psychology. We have more tension that we can tap into, more anticipation that we can tap into and play with. And so that's what we could do over here. And then, yeah, so let's see how that's done. So again, just going back to the theme of the track, what the guys are just playing with things. They're just playing with loop effects, short time spans, right? Playing with fast loops, playing with short delays. That's what this track is. Like, I mean, when I listen to this, I can honestly imagine one of them just saying, "Hey, let's just play with fast delays. Let's just play with short loops." You know, I mean, and then let's see what happens. And the thing about, like, and so they're using them as effects, right? They're also using them as ways to build tension. Okay, but there we go. We got a rise. We've got that kind of repetition through the delay. So remember the ways to build tension: rep, roll, rise, and grow. So repetition, we've got these short little repetitions all throughout the track, but over here they're being used to build tension. So rep, roll. We don't have a snare roll yet that I can hear yet. Rise, yep, things are rising, right? And one of the ways that you could rise using short time spans is with a delay. With a delay too, you can shorten the delay time. So it just gets faster and faster and faster, and that's going to give a rising effect. Also, it's the exact same thing with loops. You can loop over a shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter period of a sound, and that's going to give the rising effect too. So that's one way that they could play with this stuff to create the rise effect, not just a rep, but also a rise, by accelerating the either time delay or the loop length, shortening it. And so rep, roll, rise, and then grow. Are things going to move out into a space? Let's find out.
This is how we do. This is how we do.
Okay, so here we have a bit of a snare roll. It's a broken snare roll. A broken snare roll is simply one that sorry about that. A broken snare roll is one that's not continuous sixteenths, right? It's not just it's boom, boom, boom. And when you have a broken snare roll, I love broken snare rolls. I always like playing with them. And what you want to do is there's a couple things you could do. Obviously, the obvious thing to do is just to play a rhythm that's feeding off of whatever's playing here, right? So this is how we do. You could you can mimic the rhythm of the vocal. Another thing you could do is if the bass isn't playing through this part, you could have the snare roll play the bass part, right? Play the rhythm of the bass part. And so even though the bass isn't here, the rhythm of the bass line is here. And so it's just creating a sense of overall coherence in the rhythm. By having the snare roll, the broken snare roll, play the bass part. So two different things that you could try is one, having the broken snare roll mimic whatever else is going on. So if there's mimic a vocal rhythm, mimic a sound design melody type of rhythm, or create a response to that rhythm. So if, like classic, like a baseball game, ba, 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 right? So that's the first rhythm, ba, 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 ba. The second is a response, ba, 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 right? So creating a call response type of rhythm thing. So you could do that. You could do a mimic. You could do a response. Another thing you could try is just playing the bass rhythm for the broken. And then at a certain point, though, you can feel the things rising. We're getting more on the nose kind of risers, white noise risers. The thing I like about this white noise riser is how dirty it is. There's a lot of mid-range in it. But at a certain point, typically broken snare rolls are going to eventually get into a 16th. So let's see if this breaks into a 16th.
This is how we do.
Okay, so we're getting another roll here, which is a kick roll. This is something Chris Lake does in almost every track, and he's one of the only people that does it, but consistently does it. But this is a kick roll too, because the kicks are now playing on eighth notes, and so that's giving us the regularity that we crave. With a snare roll, we really like when it breaks down into those regular sixteenths because that's so much tension. But here we're getting some regularity with that eighth kick. So we have that broken snare roll on top, and we have the regularity with the eighth kick roll. And you can hear that kick roll starting to pick up too. And so both of them are probably going to brrr right here. Yeah, exactly. See, so the broken snare roll is a way to just kind of create this interesting rhythm, and then it just transitions into a 16th and then even down to a 32. And that's what's going on here.
This is how we do.
Okay, and then moving out into a space, so that's an example of an obvious growing the space, right? Because we're just in this ambience. And then what's really cool about this is we work up, we work all the way up, and I love this. I really love what's going on here because, I mean, this is a great example of what grow does. Grow is just moving things back. And so when all of this stops, remember PIPO, pattern interrupt payoff, when we get that the peak of the build and we cut it off, we're way back here in the mix. We're way far away. And what I love is then the PIPO or the pattern, the payoff vocal is going to just become more and more dry. And so it moves us back forward in the mix. And so this is almost a pure example of what grow does. Grow just moves things back. Okay, and then with a drop, you can have the drop be the thing that just comes in and slams back into the front of the mix. But what's interesting about this is, boom, we just go way out to here, and then the vocal is what helps us walk back to the front of the mix as we transition into the drop. So this is very cool.
This is how.
Another thing that I would play with, right? There's a lot of things in here that when I listen to it, it just gives me ideas, right? Like putting the punks over the groove, just playing with that idea. And then when we get over here is like have the PIPO stop but go into a room and go into the furthest distance in the back of the mix, right? Have the PIPO just land in the furthest point in the back of the mix. And then you can have your payoff move things back, right? That's an idea that you can play with. It's really cool.
We do. We make a move and act the fool while we.
See that? Now the vocal's dry. Okay?
This is how we do.
And it just gets more dry, and then it gets pretty dry, and we just go right into the drop.
We make a move and act the fool while we up in the club.
So before I predicted that the that drum fill was going to play here and here, but it did not. So it's cool because I like the fact,
like we do it, so show us some love.
I like the fact that it's just the vocal and then the explosion of the drums. I feel like that fill could take away a little bit of the impact that you're going to get from the drops. And so here they're just working, in both cases, they're working it just down to the vocal. And so when you finally explode into the drums, you can visually see the impact that that's going to create. It's just explosive, especially right here, especially right there. Look at that. Boom. See that dynamic contrast? And so that's really cool.
The fool while we up in the club.
So same thing as before now. We're going to get an entry cluster. So a little bit of a play on what happened before. So it's not quite the same. They're just doing a little bit of a variation. So just up, down on that one. This one's going to just stay up top a little bit. Just playing around, right? Okay, a little bit more of a bigger entry cluster because now we're throwing the vocal in here. In the HD1 entry cluster, there wasn't that vocal. Okay, we just get one effect into the second effect, both of them playing with, again, the short time spans. And here we're going to get that, and then we're going to get a vocal.
This is how we do.
You hear a little bit of an offbeat accent, so a little bit of a drum lift, kind of a silly one, but it's cool, it's just psst, I mean, I guess. I mean, that's cool, but it's not really, for me, it's not giving me the feeling of a drum lift. It's just an extra little piece that's thrown in there. I'm not quite sure how I'm supposed to respond to it, but that's funny.
This is how we do. We make a move and act the fool while we up in the club.
Okay, so more dramatic. So this is another thing that's important to talk about. Producers often ask, how do I make one drop different than another one, right? Kind of a vague question, right? Which is why it's difficult to answer for them, because the question's kind of vague. But so let me kind of break it down. What I like to think about is the question of how can I elevate one drop over another. And so the reason why I like that language, elevation, is because it basically means you're taking this drop. You could paste it over here, but then you're going to take this one to the next level in some way. Now, the most obvious way to elevate one drop over another is in HD2, just throw a ride on top. You can have them be exactly the same, but you just throw a ride on top. And a good example of this is the Piero Piropa, I just butchered his name, but his track, We Don't Need. That's it. I mean, it's so amazing because the groove in that track, and there's a reason why that is, and there's a breakdown in this course on that, but his groove sections, right, the drops are just pretty much groove. But then in HD1, it's just groove. In HD2, it's the exact same thing, just with a ride on top. So it's an elevation. It's a pure form of elevation. But there's other ways that you can elevate too, right? So here's so right off the bat, the entry cluster, a more dramatic entry cluster is a way to elevate, right? So we got that extra little thing going on in the entry sound. We've got the vocal in the entry now. Okay, and so that's an example. Or making the punks more dramatic, making the edits more dramatic. That's another way. Because in this track, there's not a lot of hooks over the groove, right? There's not. It's just mostly groove and punks. Punks and groove. That's what's going on for the most part. And so how do we develop that? How do we elevate that? And the answer is just make them more dramatic. So we have a more dramatic entry, right? We have a more dramatic edit at the end of 8 bars here. Okay, check this out.
Nobody do it like we do it,
so there we have 3 things. Okay, we have the vocal, we have the fill, and then we have the entry for the second 8 bars. But now listen to the edit at the end of this 8-bar section.
We make a move and act the fool while we up in the club.
Okay, so things get cut. That's more dramatic. Why is that more dramatic? Because when the drums come back in, they hit harder than if you didn't. Then if you left them in, obviously the drums aren't going to get hit any harder because they're already hitting. But if you take them out, boom, you're going to get hit in the chest right here. It's just more dramatic. And so again, just more dramatic punks is another way to elevate HD2 over HD1. And there we have a clean lift. A clean lift. We get a little bit of a ride on top. Okay, and we're starting to do a little bit of what I call front loading, as we're bringing things in earlier than what happened over here. So in the third 8 bars, we had that vocal. We had the vocal texture come in. Okay, now that vocal texture comes in after 8 bars. Okay, so now it's in the second 8. So one thing that we're not getting here yet, though, is the synco snare, the synco pop snare. So I'm curious to know if that's going to come in later or what. Oh, there it is. It was right there, actually. Oh, okay. So did it just come in at the 4? It just comes in at the 4. What the heck? All right.
This is how we do. This is how we do. We make a move and act the fool while we up in the club.
All right, and so one of the reasons why it could come into the 4 there is because you have like all this entry kind of stuff going on, and so you just bring it in then when there's space to bring it in. So when there's space for it to be noticed as an addition. Another reason why they brought it in here is maybe they got bored. You know, maybe they're sitting there being, this isn't, we need to do something here. We don't need to do something here, but we need to do something here. And so, hey, let's bring the snare in. Okay, there you go. Okay, so now we're just getting into outro. Okay, keeping that kind of high frequency ride going on, and I'm calling it a ride because it's functioning like a ride, like that high sheen, but it's obviously, I don't know, it sounds like a cricket sound or something. Could be a ride, like super high pitched up ride. It sounds like one frequency. It's just like, okay, a little bit of a P4. So keeping that vocal going, right? So, but the ride goes away because we're settling into the outro. So I'm expecting that vocal texture to go down or something, because it was brought up here, but I'm wondering how it's gonna continue through here. Okay, vocals going through the outro. And what's cool about that is it's a rhythmic vocal, so it's fine because that would be easy to mix in with, right? It's not that big of a deal. But if it was like some vocal, it would be annoying to mix it in, But it's rhythmic, so it's cool. Okay, so then it just gains down, and so there we go. Pretty simple outro. And so honestly, the biggest thing about this track for me is just if you're going to have minimal groove sections, drops, what can you do for them to be interesting? Okay, and you should know the answer because I've already answered this. It's punks. Okay, you can do something at the 1, right? That would be more of an entry than a punk, but like entry sounds, punks. So something at the 4. Something big, something at the 8. All right. Another thing about this track is normal spike. So if you're going to have really chill groove sections and not a lot going on, make sure that those punks are spikes, big spikes of energy. Okay. So 2 things there. Another thing that comes to mind right now to recap is elevating HD2 over HD1, right? And elevating HD2 over HD1 is all about, just making the punks more dramatic, right? Because the only thing that's going on in this track, really, you got the entries, you got the punks, you got the groove. And so for elevating HD2 over HD1, it's just about making the entries, the punks and the edits, more dramatic. That's it. Okay? And you could take inspiration on how that happens from this track, which is a fun exercise. This would be a fun exercise for any producer. Because a lot of us, are insecure about, something's got to happen. People are going to be bored of my track. I don't want them to be bored. And so practice making a really chill groove section. And so let's count the elements. Okay, we've got the groove. That's one element. So just get that, make that, whatever. And then what are we going to sprinkle on top? Okay, well, we've got a vocal that we can pull from. So that's one thing. We've got an entry sound. Maybe 2 or 3 different entry sounds that are all kind of working along the same theme. So thematic entry sounds. And that's pretty much it. The only other thing that's really going on in the drops is the vocal texture. So just 3 things. So you got your groove and then 3 things that you can put on top of the groove. Okay? And so that could be a fun experiment, is how can you do that? Right. The last thing that I want to that I really like about this is how that the broken snare is cool, how that rolls into a 16th, and then the 32. I also like the fact that they have a kick roll in here. I love hearing kick rolls because, I listen to so many tracks. It's nice to have something different. Oh, there's a kick roll, But anyway, what I love about this is how the peak of the build and that pattern interrupt part is just goes into a pure grow, just pure space, pure back of the mix. I love that. It just goes whoosh, and just kind of it's like they just throw the mix back, and then the vocal is what just kind of brings it back forward to the front, and then we explode into the drop. So really cool track, super minimal, lots of lessons to take away from this. But that's all I got. If you've got any questions about this, leave them down below. If you've got any comments that you want to add to what I've already talked about here, leave those comments down below. I definitely look forward to them. This is my favorite thing to do. I love analyzing tracks, listening to them, trying to figure out what's going on. So if you want to just converse about this, I'd love to. Leave a comment down below. And other than that, I will see you in the next breakdown. Peace. I am out of here.